context is that we have a lot of subject matter experts at IKEA. And in this case, I was an interior designer, and there was a lot of knowledge that I had in my head that I wanted to bring into the knowledge graph, right? And that's where I am right now. I'm trying to help people get the knowledge into a systematic and a more structured way so we can actually make use of it. It's great to have people's knowledge in their heads, but it's not easy to integrate into recommenders or applications. It just doesn't work like that. And in the end, the consumers of the knowledge graph is product teams that work with the search engine, working with the website, working with all aspects of the user experience. And they, of course, if they have the right tools, they make the customers happy. And to kind of give some more context to this, and this is the situation that our contributors to the knowledge graph are people who have no idea about what a TTL file is, what RDF is, reasoning. They have no idea about these kind of things. But these are the people, the subject matter expert, the IKEA veterans that have been with IKEA for 5, 10, 20, 30 years even, that hold the kind of the key knowledge within the company. Then we have the knowledge graph, the IKEA knowledge graph, and here we are working with ontologists. Or ontologists are trying to translate the IKEA knowledge into a way we can work with it. And in this situation, well, they don't know what the IKEA stuff is either. They know about ontologies and they know about the field of semantic web and knowledge graphs, but they don't know about IKEA. So this is where kind of the interaction and where tooling really comes in. How can we include the contributors more into the creation of the knowledge that sits in the knowledge graph? And in the end, we want to make that available to consumers. So developers, obviously, we talked about this, people working with recommenders, but to be honest, also subject matter experts, because they have a need to actually make sense of their own knowledge. It's a little bit all over the place, but we can help them to organize it. So I have been spending 2 years on the IKEA Knowledge Graph project, and it's been a very interesting journey, going from UX design to working with knowledge graphs and trying to onboard, get people fired up about this technology. One of the challenges has been that knowledge graphs are not that intuitive for our experts natively. If we look at this TTL file, I know Katariina, who sits here, she always says, I want to edit everything in a TTL file. She wants to do it manually, right? Sure, that's totally fine. Go nuts. Use whatever editor you want. Whatever floats your boat. But for our subject matter experts, this is not intuitive. And it doesn't matter how many sessions we have of awareness sessions trying to make them understand, this is the way we can represent knowledge in a very structured manner. It doesn't really work. But what is intuitive is what you see on the right side, which is a whiteboard, essentially, right? So it doesn't matter if you have 30 years experience and no understanding about databases, or if you are a new addition to IKEA where you bring a lot of new knowledge. Having a whiteboard is very, very intuitive in all cases. And this is not only for when we talk about design and interior design about our products. It's also if you are working in a technical field, a whiteboard is quite intuitive. Yeah, so again, kind of to reiterate the challenges that we have had at IKEA to kind of get the business on board. It is hard to get knowledge graphs because it is very academic, to be totally honest with you. Even now, after 2 years, I'm trying to catch up, but I'm nowhere near the experts. We joke about that, kind of like a hidden rule that we shouldn't use the O word, the ontology word, when we talk with business people, because it just confuses them, right? Some people say, well, I know graphs, so I make them all the time in Excel. Like it is, people think they know knowledge graphs, but they don't really do. Reasoning, what is an instance, what is a class? these are things that are kind of hard to get business on board on and to understand and get full agreement. Especially if you talk about subject matter experts who have no technical understanding about what a graph database is, what an ontology is, or an API for that matter. And I want to see here, I want to open up a little bit for discussion, and just check in here. What are your experiences with working with subject matter experts? Do you have any comments or any reflections on this? Do you recognize this? And now I have to just double check with tech team here. If someone is speaking, do we need a mic for them?
It should be picked up on the ceiling.
Perfect.
Mics, yeah.
Perfect. So, just curious, any reflections, any thoughts?
Somebody at work using the old word, that whole thing.
Semantics is also bad.
What?
Semantics is as worse as ontology.
That's also no.
Larry,
No, even in a professional context. I was at the information architecture conference last year, and I asked a question about ontology, and one of the, I won't say his name, but one of the leaders of the field said, "Oh, that's a dirty word." So even among information architects, it's a problem.
One of the things I find does work with business people is drawing the instances, i.e. the real entities linked via properties, building a graphical view of that up, and focusing on the instances first and then try and build up from that to the concepts and the ontology. But starting with the instances, things joined by lines, seems to be fairly intuitive.
And then when you do that work, you say you start on instance level. What kind of tools do you use to kind of?
Just a whiteboard or maybe FigJam rather.
Oh, yeah.
I've been using recently. You can very quickly and share and collaborate on the instance diagrams, just ovals and arrows.
Yeah.
how do you translate it to RDF then?
You don't know that.
Like the beginning stage.
Yeah.
You don't,
Yeah. But that's quite similar. We work with Mural, which is the tool I'm showing to you right now. It's just essentially a way to illustrate or visualize the domain. And a FigJam, I guess, it's a similar.
It's exactly the same as
Yeah.
Miro.
Yeah. Any other reflections, experiences? Yeah.
Do you think the people that complain about ontology can fix their engine in their car? Because it's the same problem, right? You don't need to know how an engine works to drive a car. Get it to that level of simplicity and they'll just buy it.
Yeah, I think this is. Yeah, I think you will like the coming slides here. Actually, I don't know if you've seen my presentation yet, but it's just, yeah. But it is actually quite interesting when we talk about ontology. Some of the times when we discuss that, it's essentially a representation of your knowledge domain. And if you actually, you can still talk about ontologies without mentioning the word ontology. So the challenge is when do you bring it in? When is the right time to start explaining when the right time is? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited to see how you approach this problem because I had a very similar perspective, and my approach is kind of not to so much try to teach argument or TPL to people, but just build software that makes it easy for them to build a knowledge graph without knowing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that resonates very well with our approach. We started with the O word, and we said we need knowledge graphs. It's all about ontologies. It's connecting everything. Everything will be nice and dandy. And then we moved more to use case oriented communication. Like we need to have better product recommendations on IKEA.com. And that's why we're working with the knowledge graph. That's why we need to define relationships between product categories. How do we do that? Well, we have to define the logic. Product categories relate to each other through certain connections. But we have also gone so far that route that now people think that the knowledge graph is only about recommendations. So that's the other kind of tricky end of it. But it is a strategy that has helped us as well. Okay, good. Do we have any questions in the chat?
No,
Or
the only
comments?
thing they said that some have like maybe in the room we can speak more out loud because they have some difficulty of hearing. maybe you can a little bit paraphrase the questions,
I'll
maybe
try.
if you.
Yeah.
have the capacity.
There's also a handheld, you want to pass that around,
Oh yeah, maybe that's actually a better idea.
just flip it on, yeah.
Okay, maybe if you can.
Okay, yeah.
Now it's on, by the way. Okay. What do we have here? We have a car.
I'm sorry, I spoiled my everything.
How did you know? No, but again, drawing from my own experiences, this is the topic here is that, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's so much focus on the machinery itself, and there's little focus on the experience. And I mean, if you look on the left side here, obviously you see many different pieces. It's not just about four tires and a frame. There's so much more to cars, and I think this is how my experience also have been learning about this area. There's so much focus on the smaller pieces that sometimes it's hard or you miss the big picture. And when we try to onboard subject matter experts, they don't have to understand every piece of how a car works. If you ask some expert, they would be able to explain exactly how the energy converts into torque, transfers through the differential. You can explain that all day long, but in the end, for us, it's more about those who are contributing to the knowledge graph. They want to just drive the car, put the key in the ignition. I don't know how many cars have that anymore, but you push the button on your fab and get going. And it's more about how is it to drive the car, how easy it is to steer, how easy it is to interact with it. And this is kind of where we have to probably still understand how everything works, but not only focus on that, but look more into the experience of knowledge graphs. And I was coming from a design field. I just wanted to show you this example. And it's about adding radius to a shape, corner radius. You have a square. Hello? Okay, I'm still here. You have a square and you want to add a corner radius to that. And when I started in the design field, everything was about Photoshop. So you had to do everything in Photoshop. So you needed to do a shape, and then you have to work with Bezier curves. And of course, there's code. So there's different ways to approach this problem. But on the right side, you can see what it actually is today. So when designers are using tooling, they just fill in a radius number, a value, and create a radius. So the point I'm trying to make here is that in the design field, there's so much tooling that has democratized designing. Essentially, anyone can sign up to a service and start designing. Of course, you need to have this, you have to have ability, and you have to learn about design and proportions and so on, and how to work with these. But in essence, when it comes to actually doing the task, it's quite simple. And this is where an example where we actually don't focus so much on the machinery and the specifics around it, and we just focus on the experience. So this is kind of like nice black background. It's very, how do you say, negative intonation here, but I want to emphasize that even though we have worked 2 years on the knowledge graph within IKEA and we have many supporters, it's still hard to sell knowledge graph to our business and other partners within the company. It's still hard to onboard non-technical contributors. It is not super simple. It's getting better, but it's not as intuitive and quick as it should be. It's still hard to work with the content. We can work with it, but there are many workarounds for us to actually have the contributors editing stuff, adding semantics. So tooling needs to improve to increase adoption, execution, collaboration, and governance. This is essentially kind of like what we're going to deep dive into today. Especially if we want to have full understanding of what knowledge graphs are, have experts contributing to it. We need to a little bit step up our game when it comes to tooling. Maybe I'll take a break. Do we have any in the chat? Any? No? Okay. And feel free to interrupt or disagree, for that matter. Yeah, now I will take on my UX hat and kind of outline a little bit what we need to do and what we need to do around knowledge graph tooling, because tooling needs to be, and these are the main key takeaways, needs to be intuitive, easy to use, efficient, visual. As it's actually there's some of those things that don't come up. Visual, when you talk about usability, visual as a keyword doesn't come up, but I think this is something that for the knowledge graph to succeed, visual is something we need to bring up, the visuality of things. And when all these things work, it's fun using knowledge graph. And it sounds a little bit silly, work should not be fun, but we do believe that if things are fun to use, it increases productivity and we have a good match. So I will just go into these one by one. And we need to make the tools, they need to be intuitive. And here we had a little bit of a challenge when we onboard new subject matter experts, but tools need to match the mental model of the user. And we already talked a little bit about the whiteboard. That's something that's very, very established mental model of working with knowledge. It needs to be obvious how to achieve a certain task, where the tool needs to kind of tell you where to go to achieve a certain task. Now, this is not necessarily ease of use, and I will make that differentiation later, but in the tool, you need to know, I want to achieve something, where do I do that? And how do I do that? Terminology should be easy to learn, and we have had countless of conversations internally about terminology. What should we do with the old word? Should we rephrase it? Should we come up with some new ways of communicating this in a way that resonates with our users? And that's not necessarily the case, but we have to have terminology that is quite easy to learn. It should not be such a big hurdle to understand, and it needs to be quite consistent. We already see amongst multiple tools, you talk about taxonomies, vocabularies, controlled lists, assets. There are many different words, and we need to make sure that if we have subject matter experts jumping onto the knowledge graph bandwagon or the party train, then we need to make it easy for them to kind of understand it. There's a little bit of overlap, but navigation is understood. Again, this goes back to the mental model. Where do I go to do a certain thing? And something that is lacking a little bit is today's illustrative icons that support the mental model. Because we at IKEA, of course, I work on the franchisor side of things, where English is the working language. But we have people who are not that great with English. I mean, they understand English and they can work, but as soon as you start talking about terminology that is new, if you can use icons and illustrations to kind of emphasize what you can do in a certain part of the tool, that would be really helpful. So kind of just to summarize, this is, if we think of it from a user perspective, they should know where I can do certain things. So this is where I can connect topics. Again, what is that in semantic web terminology? Who knows? But they want to connect topics. That's what they want to do. Or where they can edit their terms, or I need to click here to edit my knowledge model, right? So it needs to be intuitive. And let's see here. I want to zoom in here a little bit on that intuitive is not the same as ease of use. So if we start at the worst case scenario, the bottom left, it's where intuitiveness is very low and ease of use is low. So I have no idea what this is for, and I have no idea how to use it. This is the worst case scenario. We have the second case, which is on the top left. is that intuitiveness is high, but the ease of use is low. I get the idea, but it's still not easy to accomplish the task. On the bottom left, we have it's easy, but I don't know why I should do this. And of course, we want to go to the top right, where I totally understand what this is for, and it's easy for me to accomplish it. That's when we kind of have the best case scenario. And I want to, again, kind of take a tour here, or let's say take a detour. Just curious, I don't know how many of you are work in a knowledge graph or work with tooling, but what are your experiences with tooling and these specific areas? If you have any, of course.
Terrible.
Oh, I don't know who said that, but that's
Need the microphone.
okay. You need the mic after that.
Yeah, I guess my opinion on this was just like, in theory, for the general public, like if the tooling was good and like people can mostly kind of conceptualize what the tooling for this can be, it can be very like in the spectrum of like pretty easy to use. But I think it's still at a point where, maybe in my own opinion, I'm still fairly new to all of this. The getting why this is useful, like what do I really get out of that, hasn't really been something that's been like, I don't know, maybe to be like not that clear. So like if I were to put myself somewhere in there, I'd put myself somewhere in like the bottom right to bottom left, somewhere in the middle there.
And that's interesting. I want to unpack that a little bit, because I don't know if it's, this gentleman talked about, you were mentioning that it's more about what it can do. So I think we have a challenge here also, that if I don't know why I'm doing a certain thing, what the outcome is, it might be easy to use, but I still don't know what it's for, essentially. But that's quite interesting, because that is one of the challenges that we have, is that it's such a fun foundational thing to work with knowledge graphs, but at the same time, it's hard to communicate it and get people on board unless you talk about the specific outcome of it, more or less. Yeah, thanks for the input.
No worries.
And we had someone who, that gentleman, what?
Oh, the tooling's terrible.
Can you expand?
It's really terrible.
That's not where I was going with this, but okay.
It's an immature technology area, and it's evidenced by the fact that, everyone in the room's a true believer who's already drunk the Kool-Aid and will use the tools regardless of their quality. So the people that we need to use the tools aren't the people that are in this room. The people that we need to use the tools to build out these, to build the solutions, are the ones who don't care how it is done. They just want to solve a problem, and this is a tool. It should be as obvious as a screwdriver.
Makes sense. Yeah. Oh, we have one person over there.
I'm not certain that I think that the idea of an intuitive interface for knowledge graphs is a worthwhile idea. Because the knowledge graph basically is simple. It's instances and sets, and there's nothing very intuitive about it. You need user interfaces for specific subjects. I just went to the nowhere graph and to the, and they had a user interface, but that was specialized for catastrophe. It was the knowledge graph can be a disaster relief. That nowhere graph can do a lot more, but you cannot do, in my opinion, an intuitive interface for the nowhere graph. You can only do it for a specific subject, because nowhere graph is just too much. One other thing, a customer of mine has instance data about molecules, substances, regulatory terminology, scientific regulatory scientific terminology, and the people who are the scientists using the knowledge graph totally different than the people writing the applications for regulatory things. You cannot have one guy. So I think the idea an intuitive UI for knowledge graphs is a no starter.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that resonates again a little bit with. Oh, we have one there. But it could also be that the tooling, if it's flexible enough, let's say you could actually make it work for different use cases. Now it's like all or nothing, more or less. That could be an option of how you can make sure that when people are using it, it's catered for that specific use case. And I will talk about this on Thursday, but we try to solve it with something we call Canvas, where we sort of attempt to say, this is for this use case, this is what you do for connecting X, Y, and Z. But it's still, the same problem we're at. Is like, for all use cases, it's hard to create a user experience that is intuitive.
I don't know, I wanted a bit to contradict it, but if you look at the data, it's a knowledge graph. It's created by not expert users, and it contains topic about everything. Publication, proteins, clinical trials, persons, film, books, whatever you can think of. And somehow they managed to construct one interface on top to construct a knowledge graph. So I think it can work.
Yeah.
I disagree as well. I think I've done a little bit of enterprise UX tooling for folks, and with a good foundational information architecture, you can create a number of views into any one system that are tailored to the individual, like authors or subject matter experts or whatever. So I think, yeah, I think a lot of this scale of stuff will have multiple interfaces to the same system just by the nature of the way, the complexity and stuff.
So we have some things from chat.
Great.
Yeah. So first of all, there's Theodora Petkova said, I just wanted to share that I thought if the subject matter expert understands the importance of linking content, that would enhance the use of any platform. So maybe that boils down back to the specific thing you said, that if there's a interface for doing a certain thing, like this relates to this, then that would be an interface a user would understand and would be probably quite straightforward to make it intuitive and easy to use. Phil Taylor said, tooling is dreadful and has been for years. I'm working on a new visual design toolset that specifically addresses the theme of this presentation. That's nice, and we can maybe hear more about it. And then Laurent Alquier said that make the tooling invisible. If it is already part of people's current workflow, adoption will be there. So it's almost like if people are in Excel today, get it to Excel. I don't know. And Theodora Petkova just made a comment to what we were discussing before, that I don't think KGs can be a screwdriver. They also drive new understandings. And so maybe it's that discovery part of things. And then Laurent also said that at the other end of the spectrum, ChatGPT has a dead easy interface, simple text box, and people still have a hard time using it effectively. And there is such a thing as too simple. Where is the right middle? But I think that would, I mean, in your analysis, ChatGPT is easy to use, so it's high, but it's like, I don't know why I should do this. People are still figuring out, is this now the new Google, or is this like what to do? So maybe it's, can I trust it? Yeah. So that's from the chat.
Great. Yeah, really good points. I mean, it seems to be there is a theme here, like all or nothing. How do you really focus? I mean, the use case specific aspect is very, very strong, I would say. I think many of the comments resonate this. Good. Then I will continue to the next point is the tools need to be easy to use. And this is, I mean, more usability, that, it's about the ease of used to complete a specific task. And on the screen here, you can see that our expert want to move the term bench from surfaces to seating. And then we have another speech bubble. No, I don't want them in two places. And this action, this task seems very trivial. Like it should be very easy to move one term to another place. But the fact is, at least from our experience, it's not that straightforward. There are clever ways to kind of figure out, like, yeah, if you want to copy it, it should be a narrow, then you can use some shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts to kind of make sure you're moving it and not copying it. But again, like you have to be a very expert in the tooling to know that. Or we have other cases where you need to go multiple steps. So sometimes an easy task, technically, can be quite hard to do in a tool. So again, while the tool might be intuitive, it's like this is where I actually can work with the structure of my terms. Actually doing it might be a hard thing. And this is one of my, no, I have two favorites, but this is the second most important one, that the tools need to be efficient. And this is something, I mean, at IKEA, we have many, many tools, corporate tools, and they have been with the company for many years. And in some cases, it's like, it's not broken, it works, just keep it as is, but the user experience is not the greatest. It's not responsive, it's not fast. When you do something, you might have to wait for the thing to load, and you have to do this over and over again. So there's this challenge with big enterprise solutions around efficiency. And we just talked about, for example, changing the moving benches from surfaces to seating, right? It's a fairly simple task, but it gives another dimension if you want to actually do this in bulk. What do you do when you need to move 342 terms from one place to another, or assign 70 items to a certain type? How does the tool work then? It's fairly easy to do it once, but if you have to do that easy task, no matter how easy it is, if you need to do that 342 times, it's not going to work. And our subject matter experts change their minds all the time. Is this a type of this, or is that narrow of that? Okay, well, I need to change it. No, it didn't work out. I looked at the output, going back to the use case. What does the output, the use case we're looking at, how does that look like? No, it doesn't work. Okay, so I need to reassign things. I need to change the structure. And it happens daily. I need to do bulk edit of things. So efficiency is very, has come up a lot in our experience in the last 2 years. And then we have the visual aspect. The tools needs to be visual. And this is, again, repeating myself here, but it is about the mental model of the subject matter experts. And going back to how do you communicate, how do you visualize something to someone who doesn't know your domain? And it is very easy to sit down with a notepad or a whiteboard to describe it, to describe how things relate to each other, how they don't relate to each other. Also, we've noticed that whether you're communicating what you're creating in the knowledge graph or just want to get an overview of what you've done, a visual way is a really good method of getting a glance of what's going on without having to spend 1.5 hours go through everything and going from screen to screen, right? It might be enough to just say, this is kind of what we're working on, this is how you see it's related, to just get the attention and at least some understanding by the person you're talking to say, I kind of understand I don't know the details, but I kind of get the idea. It's easy to recreate if it's visual. And something that is kind of, from my perspective, why I kind of fell in love with knowledge graphs even before working within this field, is the fact that you can visually explore, expand, and follow the trail. Our knowledge is, and now we're talking about IKEA, we have knowledge around how people live, interior design, which kind of products cater for certain living situations. If you are, let's say, living in a small space, like small living conditions, what are the products that are more relevant for those kind of customers? Or if you're having children, let's say you have a toddler running around, and I need to buy a side table, which one? So there's so much here to explore, and it's fantastic knowledge. But we also need to give that knowledge the attention and the possibility to be explored by subject matter experts, or more importantly, people who are not subject matter experts, but have to understand the domain. And here I want to emphasize that it's also, doing this activity for both the ontology and instance level. This is a topic that is quite huge and been, one of our hardest things to communicate and to work with within the team is, where do you draw the line between ontology, the model, and the data itself? And then finally use semantic colors and icons. Icons, again, a little bit of repetition. And in this case, when I talk about semantic colors, I'm not talking about semantic tech in this case, but I'm talking about semantic colors as in like red, orange, green. How do you work with attention? How do you work with the basic ways of communicating? If you're editing in an ontology, what colors are more important to emphasize that you're in editing mode versus not, for example? If you're making a change, what are those basic aspects that you need to consider?
Yeah, from online, we have here maybe one good thing to highlight for us here is that when we talk about these visual tools, we are wanting some of our specialized knowledge graph specialized domain experts to be also taking part in doing the data modeling. So defining the data model. It's not just that we're doing the data model, just the ontologists with some advisory from them, but we have actual domain experts that we want to involve in data modeling. And so Theodora was just asking about, I guess, to your previous slide, that the problem with the bulk editing and moving things around the benches, moving their place, they are actually in IKEA, the bench information is maintained by domain experts, not by the ontologist, and their data modeling as well. So they are the ones who need to say, okay, this data model definition for bench currently is incorrect, and we're going to change it. And she was, so it's not about the data modeling in itself, that we solve it in the data model layer. They are working in the data model layer. And then there's Josh Perryman was saying that I think that part of the problem of disagreement between subject matter experts can be solved by data modeling. There are cases where the subject matter experts talk at the wrong abstraction level, and I've seen good architects help to resolve the difference through modeling. So I think that's also a very interesting one, but ultimately we want experts throughout IKEA to ultimately agree with us on the data modeling, and then having tooling to help us to do that. Right.
Yeah, and I think this, just to emphasize on that, is so when we work with subject matter experts, and I think this gentleman mentioned that you were talking about. No, I think the gentleman next to you talked about you were going down to instance level, and then you tried to unpack it in this fig jam approach, right? And then you would actually that would give the input to the model itself. And I think for us, it's also the work that we do, the ontologists do within IKEA. We want to be able to also visually show and explain that based on this input, this is what it ended up with. Do you agree with this? Does it make sense? So the different, all abstraction levels need to have some kind of visual representation for the sake of communication. So again, Katariina, you can sit in a TTL file, but bring that to some of our subject matter experts. So here's what do you think? That wouldn't make any sense, right? So we need to translate that in a way that they can resonate with, even though they don't do the work themselves, I would say. Okay, nothing else on the chat? No. And now the obvious one, which is fun. And again, work should not be fun, but I disagree. And again, I'm going back to this, the examples of the tools that we sometimes have to use at IKEA. That are, again, enterprise tools that are tedious, slow. You just want to spend time doing something else than using this tool. But it's your job, and you just have to plow through and just do it. Right? We can switch that around to say, well, we have tooling that is fun to use because all these 4 principles that we talked about work together. If it's efficient, if it's intuitive, easy, and if it is visual, we can actually have people who are working in the knowledge graph, contributing into the knowledge graph, who can even be people who say, I don't exactly know what RDF is, but working with the knowledge graph really creates value for my team, right? Or finally, I can express our knowledge we have been sitting on for years and years and years, which is the case with IKEA. We're 80-year-old company. There's so much knowledge, but a fraction of it is actually structured. Most of it is like in the air. It's kind of all around us, but then once you ask a recommender to recommend products, like, can't work with your thoughts, right? Or something that we also heard from some partners, that it's much faster editing this than the Excel, essentially what we've been working on. It's kind of like, but usually that's kind of like, if the O word is the forbidden one, then like replace Excel is like, hallelujah, kind of. But again, and this is, again, going back to the main contributor for productivity. And we do believe that tools should be easy and fun to use in the end. Good. And yeah, here is one of the hardest things that we have faced during our journey is how to work with classes versus instances, essentially. How to communicate that, how to work with that. Is product a class or an instance? And there is an answer, but if we look at other cases, it's kind of hard to navigate this topic. And I have referenced the whiteboard a couple of times, and we say, oh, it's intuitive, right? Yeah, that's the way the mental model works, it's intuitive. However, we also notice that when people explain their domain, they're mixing things, instances, classes. And as I see them writing that, I'm like, okay, but how would that? So, like, it is really not that straightforward, even for people who kind of can express it in a whiteboard. It is still kind of hard to communicate this. Oh, we have a question over there. Sorry, one sec. There we go. Thank you.
So I think that's exactly one thing, one dimension that is missing in the overall picture. I think is the tool has to be forgiving. So one thing a whiteboard is, or we know if we discuss something in a meeting, and this whole thing will be a journey. It will not be a task where I really know what I have to do. This will be a journey. We've all sat in a meeting where people disagree, but yeah, if I say, okay, is it a class, is an instance, I have to put this in my tool. What do I do? If the tool is not forgiving enough to say, okay, you can decide later, then you write it down or open up an Excel or open up a notes file and write it down. Okay, we had another idea. And then you start word clouds, because you didn't agree on one word or one category. You didn't decide on if it's an arrow or if it's a red arrow or a green arrow, because really these tools have to be somehow able to cope with the fuzziness that if you begin this journey, it will be not correct. And we also have to work and live with that the first few iterations that we are working with will probably not be technically correct. So if I start with the turtle file, I have most of the time the problem that, okay, yeah, some things are good, and then it's a text file with comments, because then some kind of expert goes through and really does a version of this that's technically correct. And that's really, you can go too much and everything was forgiven, and then you have more work than you had before sorting that out. But also most of the time what I see is that the tool is giving you one option, and then you have the problem that if you don't go for that one option, people will move out of that tool into another tooling. And that's what the whiteboard does exceptionally well, that if you don't decide on something, then it's just scribbling around and say, okay, yeah, we will decide on that later. And that is one dimension I think is missing, and it goes exactly at that point where you have this discussion. Probably you will not end up after one meeting where you decided, okay, it's this or that.
Could you just for the sake of clarity, could you give an example of what, just simple example, what could that be like you have to take a decision on?
If I just say, okay, we had, is it a subclass or a part of, or is it some kind, is it some kind of class that's an overarching class? Is it an instance? Is it you can go, is it a synonym? Is it, is this the same? Yeah, this question of one person says, okay, that's the same as this one, and the other says, no, these are completely different things. Could be domain experts, that one expert says, okay, this is important to separate this. One expert says, okay, let's keep it the same, it's good. You will write it down and then go through that later. And if your tool doesn't allow that, people will move on from your tool.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I think maybe Katariina has some comments on this, but before that, I think that's a great addition for giving on a tool side. I mean, more from a UX perspective, not so much workflow perspective, but from a UX, how you interact with the tool. I think definitely there's, tracking what's going on, being able to undo things, being able to kind of really evaluate if the choices that you made are good or bad, changing them. I think that's definitely maybe something that I would actually like to add to this model. But in terms of workflow, I don't know, Katariina, if you have some additions to this.
Yeah, I can certainly say that discussion you were illustrating is very much what I call the data therapy phase, when you're still figuring things out. And we usually do that on a whiteboard, on a Miro. With domain experts, we go through competency questions, and then we figure out what actually here might be on the class level and what is then ultimately on the instance level. It also needs the understanding of the use case it's going to be applied. I mean, you should not do your knowledge graph too snug to a use case, but sometimes use case is the best way to figure out what it should be, what should be the first thing. But also my favorite ontologist interview question is to give an impossible task where there are many possible class levels and many possible instance levels, and just see how the ontologist copes with the complexity, or with even the, the conflict, or no, the paradox. Because the world doesn't divide itself to one layer of classes and one layer of instances. It's like a multi-dimensional thing of clustering of classes and instances. And when it comes to a knowledge graph, you just need to tackle it case by case and domain by domain. But I hear I think for us, for this session, the usability and democratization, just the existence of class and instance is already really hard for non-tech people. If they haven't done their first object-oriented course, if they don't come from IT, then this is really difficult. Like Adam said, there's just all things on the white table, and they don't understand this difference. Great.
Yeah. Before we go Before we continue, can you maybe check the chat if there's any? No. Okay. Very good. Yeah, this takes us to our next kind of topic, which is again working with. I mean, following this challenge of understanding what a class and instance is. We don't have really a tool where we can essentially visualize both the classes, the relationship between the classes and what is the relationship between the instances. And you can see here on the screen, and let's see, maybe I can zoom in a little bit here. So when we work with subject matter experts, we have these data therapy sessions. It's like, okay, how can we work in Miro then to kind of, illustrate both layers. So on the top, you see kind of like the ontology level, and then you see the instance level at the bottom. And I think this has been a very nice way for us to work with subject matter experts to really explain, no, what you're talking about there is probably an instance of this. Or what you're referring to here might merit its own class, for example. So, and it has been like in current tooling, you have to choose which is the one that you're showing, essentially. And for us, this has been, again, a tool for making this more understandable, because it is quite complex. But in this way, it looks complex, but still, again, the mental model is that, okay, well, that black box is an instance of that yellow thing there. And there is 3 of them. Now, of course, you online cannot see where I'm pointing, but here, for example, right? And how does this black box relate to that black box? And where does that relation come from? Yeah, that comes from over here, right? So, I mean, for most of you, it's probably natural, but when you're sitting with, again, a subject matter expert who has a lot of knowledge, just happen to not have knowledge within this area, I think they also get kind of enthusiastic about like, okay, well, actually, I know my domain a little bit better now. And it contributes back to their area of or their way of understanding their own domain, I think. It's really a nice interaction that we usually have. It's like, that makes sense. That's actually an instance of something. Oh, we had a question. Sorry, Katariina. Thanks.
Not so much a question, just as a call out. Like oftentimes these discussions I see are challenged because they're happening verbally or they're happening in some sort of chat thing. And I learned this from working with really good UX people. The dimensions of those conversations are really narrow because it's very sequential. And when you put a picture up like this, you've expanded the dimensions and you've given them, okay, here we have colors that we can work with. We have layout and positioning and other things. So like you give them these, when you put the picture in front of them, that gives them these extra tools. They're no longer confined to these very sequential, conversations. Now they can see these and then they can start interacting with the tool, which can also de-escalate a situation sometimes that's going out of control. But I think, I just want to call it, this is, I think, a really good example of why UX is helpful for solving really complex problems, because you're expanding the tool set for the team to solve the problem.
Yeah, and sorry, before we go to you, one thing I want to add to that, and it's been quite interesting talking to, again, when we're trying to sell in the knowledge graph and we kind of show these examples of how we try to organize the knowledge, some people get overwhelmed. It's like, wow, but this is such a huge thing. I need to navigate this, right? It is feasible to navigate this, and you can follow the lines, and you can understand where the classes are coming from. And our intention is not to remove complexity, because the IKEA knowledge, the domain, it is extremely complex. And there are lines drawn from left and right classes from this company working with materials to sustainability. The domain is complex, and knowledge graph will not remove the complexity, but actually just visualizing the complexity in a way like this is already quite helpful, I think, for people to start thinking. But your yellow we also have a yellow box like that, or yellow circle. Is that the same yellow circle? That should they be the same? So I think that again, how to say, highlights the need to synergize and connect the dots, even amongst departments who should be actually collaborating. Sorry, oh, you have already the mic. Great.
I'm having fun, but I feel like we've completely hijacked your presentation.
No worries, no worries. That's what it's for.
So I guess in this vein, have you looked at the user experience of workflows where essentially in creating information from your subject matter experts, it's not necessarily linear. I go to add a new bench and get down to the part where it's about materials and materials aren't there. So now I got to go figure out where do I go to add the materials so I can finish this description, this instance of a bench. And I don't know if that's something it's more than just moving things from one sort of classification to another. I don't know if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely, we're not there yet, because you have to design that workflow. How does it work within the organization? What would be the right people? What would be the roles? How would that flow? So I think that's definitely something that we want to do. Is then implementing it. The governance, of course, is the hardest part. But yeah, I definitely do believe that that's the right way to go. Can you create a grace period where obviously it's not rocket science. I mean, there's a lot of workflows in tons of tools. So, the draft, the review, the this and that. So it's definitely possible to do. And I think that's the approach we will be heading towards going forward as well for us. Oh, yes.
The complex, I'd say that diagram oversimplifies and makes simplistic the ontology level by representing properties as just a simple line. At the instance level, representing links or triples via a line makes sense, but a property is an important resource in its own right. And there's a lot of things you can say about a property, not only its domain and range, and some properties don't have a domain and range, which makes it pretty impossible to represent them as a line. But there's other useful things about it as well, like is it reflexive, is it transitive? And very importantly, does it have a super property? Because there's a lot of useful properties which have sub-predicates, like location. You can have sub-properties of location, like headquarters location, registered location, store location, and so on. So I've been very much arguing for not using this sort of simplistic approach of representing property definitions as lines, but some sort of like the original Chen diagram representing them as diamonds or something like that, because there's useful things to say about them and relationships between properties, like inverses and super properties.
Maybe answer that. So one experience we've had in IKEA is that we hardly need the use of inverse properties or transverse. We don't use RDF's domain and range because that's used for reasoning, and that's kind of a reasoning we don't need. Yeah, we don't need it. I mean, it's used for reasoning. It's not used for constraints, but shackle is used for constraints. So actually what you're seeing, the dotted lines are shackle definitions. And that's something we do need to communicate, because we do need to set shackle domains as our ontologies and will be used by applications. So what we could explain for the experts in the room, that the schema, that this yellow level is the schema, and it's kind of the marriage between ontology and shackle. That's like then the schema for certain use cases.
But then hopefully a property shape will be a node on
Yeah, exactly. If we would then do the property shape, like how shackle looks like in triples, that would make this whole yellow level super trippy for our business experts or domain experts. So that we wouldn't want to show. We would want to show them as dotted lines between classes, because that's ultimately and then sometimes we need super property. So sometimes we do have cases where we're solving exactly with super property, and that's super hard to do here. So then we have like something else in place, and it's super, like, that's unsolved by us. We don't know how to solve it. We just kind of show the property hierarchy on the side a little bit. By the way, this has a property hierarchy. Yeah. There's a question here.
No, just a comment. I'm sorry if I spoiled the next slide. Point out that you had to explain this diagram to a room full of experts in terms of user experience.
That's what we're here for. Exactly. It is not. But I think you have to. Sorry.
Even to a room full of experts is not.
Even to a room full of experts is not obvious what that is.
It's a very good point.
That's why we have data therapy sessions where we unpack. Let's see. Maybe I can check if there's anyone in the chat. Let's see here. There's nothing in the chat. Okay, good. Okay, so we have 20 minutes left. So what I was planning is to kind of show a little bit an example or a demo of how we use our current tool to kind of make it easy for people to express their domain or knowledge domain. And on Thursday, I will be presenting a specific use case for so knowledge graph enhanced data catalog, how we can add attributes to products using semantics. So if you want to know more about the steps prior to what I'm going to show you now, you can, please join that session, and you can see the whole journey. But so kind of not to just talk all the time, I thought it would be nice to kind of just show a little bit what we have. And now I'm going to pivot a little bit. Because something that bothered me already last year when I was here is then why is the Knowledge Graph conference not using a knowledge graph to organize sessions? Why can't I find topics, sessions based on topics? Why can't I find all the sessions that are made by or held by experts from a certain company? Like, that bothered me a lot. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to take that as an example of how we can express this, or how we would do it in IKEA to express this kind of situation we're in. And we have something that we call canvases, and we have developed this together with, and I think I have this here, together with our partner, the factory, and we have developed this together with our subject matter experts. Like, how would you like to express this knowledge, or a certain knowledge? So I kind of did a little bit of pre-work. Let me see here. Yeah, so what you see in front of you is kind of, it's what we call the canvas. So this is not where you define the ontology. This is not how you, where you work with your vocabulary. This is our version of the whiteboard, right? Give me a whiteboard, express what is it that you're working with. So again, going back to this topic of why can't we have a semantic engine, a knowledge graph driving the topics in the knowledge graph conference. So obviously what I'm going to show you is very simplistic, but let's say I'm searching for a session here. We have all our sessions. We have, let's see, one second. We can bring out stuff to the canvas. You don't have to draw the box itself, so that's an improvement from a whiteboard. So we have my session. So let's actually search for me. So the session that it's on the canvas is this session you're watching right now. We have me, who is a speaker, and I essentially can just draw a line between these two instances and say, okay, well, this session is hosted by me. And now this is very easy to do, and obviously this is straightforward, but think about it, our subject matter experts would do this for product categories, living situations, seasons, colors, events, Christmas. How does Christmas relate to colors, types of products? And we can go further than that. Something that I would love. Okay, well, first of all, let's look at what kind of session is this? Well, this is a workshop session, right? So let me just connect that. I have the relation, and I hit apply. What else can we say about this session? Well, I work for IKEA, obviously, and I do this connection here. Now, something that I would love to have for next year, and maybe this is a call out to the organizers, hopefully they're watching this recording. Let's actually put some topics in here. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about tooling, and I'm talking about user experience, right? So the session is about these two things. So here is topic, and I add that to user experience. And already here you can see what if I wanted to add this both at the same time. So there's space for improvement. But now essentially I have everything connected. So if I want to, as an expert, you just save this to KGC mapping. Right. And now I'm going to jump a little bit here. Let me see some secret stuff. Okay, so here we can see our session, and we can also, of course, let me do like this. We can now explore whatever we just modeled. So I can actually use our diagramming tool to explore. This is what I meant with exploring, kind of following the trail. We see what kind of session it is, and I can, of course, put everything out there. So we have Adam, we have tooling user experience. So this is essentially just a way to kind of show that this is the level of intuitiveness we kind of need when, for example, you have a subject matter expert that says, for a sofa, what kind of product categories are good as recommendations for this sofa, right? They wouldn't be modeling instances, so articles to articles, but they would express their home furnishing logic. A sofa and a decorative cushion, a sofa and a throw, right? And this is knowledge that we kind of have within IKEA, but it is, right now, this is the first time that we can express it in a way that makes sense. So, yes, go ahead.
So online, and Theodora was just asking if this can then be exported to JSON LD. And to which I replied that this is actually live RDF. This is in the triple store information that you can then export in your favorite RDF format or syntax. So yes, you can.
Yes. And again, think about like the developers. So that's, again, if we can make it easy for subject matter experts to model this, a developer who doesn't know anything about home furnishing topics, again, can use that data to say, hey, I can improve my recommendations, and I will not only use the wisdom of the crowd, which is actually a topic that you will be talking about on Wednesday, right? Recommenders using the knowledge graph, Katariina. But yeah, I think that kind of concludes the main part of the presentation, and we still have some time left. I mean, if there's any comments or questions or reflections, maybe online, or yeah, we have one over there.
Is there anything under the magic there of your canvas that you were just showing us? Can you talk about that?
Sorry,
there was magic. There was some pre-existing ontology data modeling that Adam did.
Oh yes, yes.
Bring the mic
over there. So so again, so we have these 3 layers of the knowledge graph, which you also written an article about that. So we have the ontology, the first layer, the top layer, and then we have the controlled vocabulary and the instances, and then we have the connection between those. So what I showed you now is the actual, the last step, which is the connecting it. But we have the previous step of defining the ontology, defining the vocabulary. So there has been some pre-work magic to this. And that's what I was mentioning, is if you want to see all those steps, then you can listen in on Thursday, where we actually have recorded a subject matter expert, not me, but a subject matter expert, actually going through the steps and all the way to the end.
Oh, he answered.
Yeah. So I was wondering, because I sort of missed the first 10 minutes. I wanted to know, what do you use your knowledge graph for? If for internal recommendation or anything? Because I work at WordLift. We do have a tool, but the main use case is for SEO. So we actually publish the data so that the data gets grabbed by search engines. And then I was wondering, what were your main use cases?
So again, well, you were not here, but we did discuss a lot the challenges with knowledge graphs, where you're trying to make the case for a knowledge graph, but you don't know the use case for it. So that's kind of something that we have to find a good balance around. But we also concluded that there are, we have use cases like product recommendations, for example, or for example, another example, which again, I will talk on Thursday about, I will discuss or present on Thursday, is how we can add attributes to product data that does not sit on the data, on the object itself. How can we create, attributes that goes, generated through a logic, rather than someone having the job to, in the source system, add attributes to a product, which is not doable. Personalization is another thing. Again, now you just saw a very simple example of how we connected sessions, but this could be something like seasons, or let's say events, cultural events. In Sweden, we have crayfish party events, right? That's when we eat crayfish. It's not a big thing in the States, but in Sweden, it associates with drinking alcohol, being out, eating in nature, partying. So you need outdoor furniture, you need beverage holders, glasses, mugs, you need so much for that. So again, all of this, again, going back to like the use case, personalization is another example of that.
Maybe just to kind of, we're in this in KGC, we're going to talk about the use cases as well. So tomorrow I'm hosting a workshop to talk about in general use cases in e-commerce and the things we're doing in IKEA, the things like in previous places as well. So that's going to be interesting. SEO might be actually one part of e-commerce use cases. And then in Adam's talk on Thursday, he's going to talk about this additional rule-based product information. Wednesday, I'm going to talk about recommendation systems. So we're going to elaborate on our use cases here quite a lot.
I have just a follow-up question. Are these properties can be found anywhere on the front end of maybe of the website? I mean, is the knowledge graph attached to anywhere on the front end of your websites or anything?
Yeah, so there are properties that are internal that we use just for internal purposes. So the logic is, we don't want to expose kind of how we organize our knowledge, essentially, but we want the output to be there. So we have some use cases where we work with upsell, for example. That is out there where we say, if you upsell to this product, you have these benefits of that. So most of the stuff is kind of the plumbing until you get to the output, but we don't disclose the how do you say, the journey, the attributes for the journey.
We had a few questions here, so just gonna take the mics.
I was curious if anyone in the room had experience with any skeuomorphic analogies for dealing with knowledge graphs. And to define skeuomorphism, like one of the ways Apple made it easy to onboard onto their phones is to map it onto physical things that people are already familiar with. So email's an envelope, your phone is a receiver, and your save button in a lot of software is still a floppy disk. So I was wondering if it's possible to like hide the graph using some analogies. Like, for example, oh, all my product categories have fallen on the floor. Please help me put them into the proper shelf, right? Like, I was wondering if
I would like to know that as well.
anyone else in the room has like useful analogies for dealing with knowledge graphs.
It's the classic detective with the big wall with string, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, we don't have a good. I mean, we have a heart. That's what we communicate. The heart, where you have products, you have home furnishing knowledge, interior design knowledge, you have whatever. But that's not really the same topic what you're talking about. We're trying to illustrate certain things in a way that people can resonate with, but we still haven't found any good way.
So I'm wondering how much all of those things you've shown us is working on the ontology itself or perhaps knowledge graph, and how much of it is working on the tooling. You're working with user experience for domain experts, but how much effort is put to advance what's possible with the tooling? Because as somebody described a moment ago, tooling is terrible.
So sorry, see if I can. So you mean how much effort we put in to improve the tooling? Yeah.
Versus just working on the knowledge graph itself.
Well, I would say that, I mean, we have, and we say that to our the people who are working on the knowledge graph, is that, you know, and we have partners with MetaFactory is the tool that we use, and if we see some area of improvement, I should be able to do this. We capture it, that requirement, and then we work together to see how we can improve and how we can co-develop something to actually make that. Because if we have that need for a certain feature, probably other companies also have that same need. So for us, the most important thing is just to kind of capture the need and the features. So what I mean is that as you work with the knowledge graph, you discover areas of improvement which you wouldn't catch otherwise. So it's kind of an integrated process. You do both at the same time, but you have to take sidetracks. If you're working on something, oh shit, I need to document this thing I want. So you spend maybe 20 minutes documenting it, taking screenshots, and then you have to go back to doing your job. But there's no other way of doing it, to be honest.
I wanted to ask, working with the domain experts and looking for use cases for them that could bring value to the company. Did you think of just documenting these experts with these long histories in overcoming challenges in a way that may be useful in the future, but there is no use case in the present form, because you're still working with them, so you could collect their knowledge.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, in that sense, we are quite use case focused. So we wouldn't be collaborating unless there's a use case. And to be honest, most of the use cases that we are looking at are not like innovation in any way. They're like problems we've had in the company for many, many years. One of the sponsors of the IKEA knowledge graph is actually, he left IKEA, but he has been working 25, 30 years at IKEA and doesn't know so much about knowledge or anything about knowledge graphs. But he has seen certain things fail over and over and over and over and over. And he was like, I don't know exactly how it works, but this could potentially be something that could fix it. And then you have people who are new to the company and know a lot of technical knowledge. When you try to sell it in, it's like, Yeah, but we can solve that through other, statistical model, right? For example. So when it comes to the use cases, we do focus on existing problems. And I think we will be busy for years and years and years to solve those problems before we even start looking into, use cases that might be, innovative use cases. Like you don't know that you need this, but let me explain it to you. We are more like, we know you have a problem with this, and we can work with knowledge graphs to try to fix that problem. But then we need your engagement. We need to collaborate.
Yeah, I wanted to pile on the question about tooling. I worked a lot with CMSs over the past like 25 years, and everybody hates the authoring environment in their CMS. And CMSs, I think, have suffered because of that. So we're kind of earlier days, and I guess I would just urge everybody in the room to like pay as much attention to that as we can and do as best we can to figure it out.
Just to the best practices, I don't use the word class if possible. I just use set, because people have nebulous ideas of what a class is. Like, oh, I know object-oriented programming, and that has nothing to do with old classes. But a set is an easy concept, and I can say set intersection, set union. I can explain that graphically. It's really simple, and people understand it.
Good point.
We actually have comment from online, so I'm going to take that now. And actually answering to the best practices, kind of fun. Laurent Acquir said, I used to believe ontology or semantic were dirty words. It is an education problem. People sort of understand what a database is. They sort of understand other technology terms. They are professionals. They can sort of understand this as well. I do use the detective murder wall to introduce people to what knowledge graphs are. They connect people and organizations. Some links can be verified and other hypothetical. There is a time dimension to them. Murder walls are great to illustrate KGs. Murder walls are not used much in reality for logistical reasons, but they are great storytelling devices for a movie and can embed a huge amount of information in a glance. People I work with can relate to that.
Yeah, I'm looking for that Outlook invite. The murder wall invite for.
So I have to now change from data therapy to murder walls.
Yeah. Great. I think, yeah. Oh, yeah, we still have two more.
This is actually a question. I was just going back to the site and noticed the word democratize in your title. We haven't really said much about democracy. We've talked about socialization and getting people involved, but not really democracy in the form of voting or building consensus or collaboration. So I wonder if you've got anything in your tooling or whatever that addresses that aspect.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, the topics are how can we include more subject matter experts. You're right. I mean, it doesn't necessarily directly relate to that. But if we take the example of the canvas that you saw, that's something that we do together with subject matter experts. How would you like it to work? And we have quite many, so they don't necessarily vote on ideas in that sense, but they are involved in the process of designing the tooling that works for them. And we are not telling them, here's a knowledge graph, you need to use this tool, but they're involved in the process in that sense. So a lighter form of democracy.
Hey, so this is kind of maybe just a note to bring up. Something I kind of like heard along this like discussion a lot was just the idea of like when people are talking about knowledge graphs, they always like bring up like, oh, we use like Miro or Figma or a whiteboard to bring up this stuff, and it was an interesting point as to why they nobody ever brings up the idea of like, oh, they're using so and so knowledge graph tool to bring up this. Even I remember like, Katariina, you were even mentioning like, oh, I'd rather just use a turtle file to handle like this kind of data. I think it's actually an interesting point on the canvas that you showed, and it was made by like the Matter Factory people, that they actually did a really good I guess innovation or evolution on like this kind of editing, where they put a little more focus on kind of the speed and motion involved with building these. Like it's a lot less of what I've seen with a lot of other tools that have been like going around, where things are very, I guess, form based. So you would be like, oh, add a node, give all of this information, and then finally you can create the node. Oh, in order to like connect two things. It's a new form saying, oh, I want to connect all this information together. It's a little more just drag and drop. I guess the big thing with the form issue is, for me, if I had to go through all that work to just get things set up, I could have, and I've seen people try to like spend an hour or so just initially trying to get the stuff set up. I could have done all that in like 2 or 3 minutes just on a turtle file, like the exact same amount of work, and then just put that turtle file into these tools to just use the visualization aspect. But the actual creation aspect is something that like many people, I know, sell, but they always, I don't know, it still feels a lot slower than just using Figma or Miro or a whiteboard just to explain this information or to create this information. And then you can just draw it out and then write it on a turtle file afterwards. You can do that in 10 minutes versus the initial hour of creating the...
If we have vendors here, you should take notes. Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I don't have anything. Let's give the mic to that.
Oh, yeah. So on the topic of democratizing this sort of contribution, that's something that I work on. Is you also mentioned how other tools have drafts and review process and stuff. That's what I work on. And so if anyone is interested in this situation where you accept contributions from anyone in the general public, but you still have subject matter experts review it before it goes live, I'd love to hear from you.
Great.
I'm currently reviewing them as turtle files, so it would be great to have other people there, domain experts, be involved in that, and not having to do pull request reviews, but something else. Yeah, let's talk.
Great, thank you so much. We're over time, but appreciate joining the session, and thanks so much for your great feedback and inputs. And if you want to reach out to any of us, please feel free. Questions or comments, or just want to have a chat. So thank you so much. Great.
Oh, this thing? Oh, yeah, that's the... They're also doing that talk. The people who made that in that visual. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, what's up? Sorry, what did you say?
No,
in Swedish. Oh, that's why. You're not Swedish.
Oh,
you are.
Your last question. Isn't that
Ja, vad kul. Ja, vi får kika. Vi får köta lite. Ja, jag kommer ut.